So I had a chance to read your upcoming book, It Takes
Yeah.
What It Takes, coming out in February. And in that book, you talked about a concept, neutral thinking.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So neutral thinking was this idea that was really built in large part at the University of Alabama. You know, our first year we got to Alabama, people forget we were 6-6. And the culture was filled with so much negativity. And so if you just kept telling people, hey, be positive, be positive, be positive, it didn't ring true. It didn't make sense. So one of the first things that we started to do was well, where does the mind really have its most influence? And when we think of positive versus negative, what's really the strongest? And what we found out was that negative thinking and negativity in general were by far more powerful than being positive. So if you were equally negative to equally positive, that equally negative would outweigh the positive as 7 did to 1. So what we started to realize is, what if we could just minimize the negativity without really focusing on the positive? And we've realized the carrier of negativity is language. When I'm talking about, I don't want to be here, it's hot, man, we can't beat Louisiana Monroe, how are we going to have a chance against LSU? Whatever the situation, that language becomes really powerful. So the first thing you have to do is learn to stop. What if we just minimize negativity? What if we just stop saying stupid shit out loud? So the first step to being neutral is learning how to minimize negativity. Now the second thing is, you can't just not do your way to being successful. Neutral is this idea that the past is real, okay? So what people really struggle with positive thinking is the state that you're at, this negative, difficult state, never happened. And you have to just pretend it didn't happen and you move to this positive outcome. Neutral thinking says, you know what? That happened and it was bad. However, the past is not predictive. What happens next is based upon what you do, not what has happened. And so it's this combination of what we call behavior-based thinking, that I focus on the next behavior and not what has happened. So a neutral thinker is somebody that, instead of thinking about outcomes, we're not going to worry about outcomes, we're just going to be a better version, and hopefully the outcome will change. So it's the acceptance of the past without bias. It happened, it's real, but what happens next is totally based upon what we do, not how we feel.
Give me an example of some neutral thinking that everybody would be familiar with.
Nike would come up with the advertising marketing campaign, just do it, which is a neutral statement. Don't worry about an outcome. Don't worry about winning. Just do it. Just go compete. Just go out there and live. And that advertising campaign took off like wildfire, because people love marketing to themselves. People love marketing, being marketed to. And so neutral is this idea that it's focusing on a behavior, not an outcome, and just do it is the ultimate behavior.
You have an interesting point of view on option versus choices. Tell me a little bit about that.
So an option is that, hey, what food am I eating tonight? What movie are we going to go see? Well, options really don't have consequences. Choices have consequences. So the idea of options versus choices is that there really are no choices. If you're going to be a maven, if you're going to be one of the top people in your industry, if you're going to be one of the top people in business, there's not an infinite way that you do it. And an athlete's no different. An athlete is a unique value proposition. So if you're not sleeping, you're not very valuable. If you're not healthy, you're not very valuable. If you can't go out and do the things you're supposed to do, you're not very valuable. So there are not an infinite amount of choices. There are an infinite amount of options, but choices, in my opinion, have consequences. That's why you hear Coach Saban often talk about the illusion of choice. There really aren't choices.
I love the passage in the book about being a heat seeker versus a heat deflector. Talk to us about that.
So the heat seeker versus heat deflector, I heard probably 10 years ago, Tony Blair was doing the graduation speech. This is just after he had come out of being prime minister, and he talked about leadership. And he talked about leaders is about wanting the pressure to be on your back, not looking for somebody else to carry it, but knowing that somebody's got to carry that weight and reaching out for that person to be you. He said that leaders are heat seekers, not heat deflectors. Ultimately, I think how that connects to pressure as a privilege is, if you're good, people are going to expect you to be good. One of my favorite Nick Saban quotes was, if you're a good player, you've got to play good. And as a leader, your role is going to change. Sometimes your role is going to change, but you've got to carry that weight. We shouldn't be afraid of our own greatness. You know, people always look at problems are the only reason we should improve. Our greatness should be our impetus for improvement. You know, if you're a real maven, you should want to improve because you are successful, but if you're going to accept greatness and if you're going to recruit people, when you have talented people that work for you, you have to make demands of them, right? You're paying them money. They have to carry their weight. So ultimately, pressure is a privilege is about carrying that weight and not being afraid of the burden and not being afraid to know that this shit is heavy.
So Kirby Smart made the choice that he wants to compete for a national championship every single year. And he talks about how pressure is a privilege. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, pressure is a privilege is actually a quote that came from Billie Jean King, that you can't have anything really good in life without pressure. And what Kirby was talking about was we had made it to the national championship, we lost in overtime, and a lot of people were saying, do you feel pressure to get back to the SEC championship? Do you feel pressure to get back to the game? But they were making an implication that pressure was a bad thing. Pressure fundamentally is a neutral term. It's not good or bad. Now, you could infer that the application of force all around you is not very good, certainly not very comfortable, but what pressure does is it forces you into the unknown, okay? And the unknown is where all the growth is, but it's where all the fear is too. So looking at pressure as a privilege is basically saying, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because I know through that discomfort is going to be something better for us long term. And if you're going to be good at anything, you embrace pressure as a rite of passage to get where you want to go.
The thing I think is most applicable about everything you espouse in your book that I've heard Nick Saban use time and time again is who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say.
Yeah, you know, it's a big thing that we talk about. And I think it's a big thing that, you know, when I spend time with these coaches, when I spend time with leaders, we've got to realize that the camera's always on and we're setting the tone. Our leaders, as much as we can educate them and give them the tools, at the end of the day, they're either doing it or they're not. You know, who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear a word you say. I mean, it's essentially your actions are going to define you, not your talent. Your potential is the gifts that you have to be a great leader, to be a great earner, to be a great winner. Your effectiveness is, do you do it? Are you effective? How do you create that? How do you make that? That's what it really is. To me, you define what it is you want to do. All right, if I want to be a great leader, if I want to be a great head coach, the path is already there. The choices are already there. They've been determined. And now I've got to make a decision. Am I going to live those choices? Or am I going to be a front runner? So to me, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear a word you say is really what it's all about. You know, it's about your substance versus your style.